Hello and welcome. So, Season 7 has dropped, and I've already started to build lists and to experiment. And I wanted to showcase today one list that I've been gravitating towards from the beginning. So, let's have a look. So, this is the list I've come up with. This is actually quite similar to something that I've run already the last seasons, but now the units are actually quite different. So, this is Rainbow Guard with Renly King the South, double Thorn Watch with the Pikeman Captain, Riders of Highgarden, and our NCUs are Olenna Tyrell, Lord of Varys, and Elden Estamont. Let's get into it. So the first unit is the Rainbow Guard. The Rainbow Guard, there's actually lots to unpack. The Rainbow Guard has 8 models, but each model counts as having 2 wounds, so now they straight up have 16 wounds, with a 3-up armor and a 4-up morale. And you see their attack profile stayed the same, 7 dice on a 2+, which is just ridiculously excellent. Then they have the Relic Cry ability, which stayed the same, which is nice. Swift Strike, which means they can reposition after attacking, which is very nice. Claims to the Kingdom means they count as controlling Crown and Letter for tactics cards and effects, which is pretty nice. And then their most unique thing is the Baratheon banners. They have 4 banners, and when they activate, they can activate up to 4. You can, for example, give them Crit Blow and Sundering, which is what you most often use. You can make your attack vicious and give additional wounds if your opponent fails the panic test. You can give Panicked and Weakened token to your opponent, or you can heal 2 wounds and reroll charge distance dice. From my experience, as I said, you use most often the Crit Blow and Sundering, and the 2 wound healing, and especially rerolling charge distance dice, which is most useful, but also the other abilities can be situationally very, very useful. So, I think, this unit basically got a massive buff by just doubling their wounds. They lost their resilience, but instead they just got double the wounds, which is just a big, massive buff. I think this unit is a massive stat check now for your opponent with 16 wounds, with a 3-up armor. If your opponent wants to destroy them, he really needs a lot of firepower. Otherwise, he will not get through those guys. So I feel like they basically have it all. They are super tanky. They are reasonably quick, especially with Swift Strike. You can reposition yourself after attacking, which is very nice. And they have pretty high damage. As I said, with 7 dice on a 2-up, if you give them Crit Blow Sundering, Weakened token is not especially useful on them, maybe to get rid of some crit blows, but on a 2-up you will still hit lots of your hits. So this unit is just massively flexible. You can have them tank when you need. You can have them lead the charge if you need. You can use them offensively, defensively. This unit just got a massive buff. As I said before, with resilience, they were not really all that reliable. But now, since you just straight up get double the wounds, they are a very reliable unit. And also with this list especially, you don't really miss all those attachments that you use in that unit. So really a great unit, super unique, massively strong at the moment. Let's look at Renly's commander cards. They have not changed with the update. Then Overconfidence is a great card against Cav, because you can charge an opponent when they enter maneuver, march, or retreat. So if you have a Cav that wants to charge you, they first do their free movement, then you interrupt them and charge them, which is nice. I think this is most useful with the Rainbow Guard itself, because as you will see later, you don't really want to charge your opponent this way with your Thornwatch, and also not with your Riders of Highgarden. But with the Rainbow Guard, it's pretty nice to have. Knights of Summer just makes your opponent take a panic test, which is not really all that useful usually. And Lavish Encampment is a nice one, because sometimes your opponent wants to block certain zones that you want to take. You can just move them over. You can block zones that your opponent would like to take that you don't really want. You can also, for example, guarantee swords if you're not first player, your opponent takes the swords, you just move them, for example, over to bags so they cannot heal, and you take the swords yourself. Especially useful, I guess, with the Thornwatch shooting some additional times. So cards are really not that great, but in my opinion, it's a worthwhile downside with how massively strong the new Rainbow Guard is. Okay, let's look at the new Thornwatch. They have completely overhauled this unit. It was a quick and nimble skirmisher unit before, which I have loved, and now it's one of the best, if not the best, ranged unit in this game. As you see, they have potential for massive damage. As you can see, they have their crossbow with 7/7 and 4 attacks on a 3-up with precision and sundering. So this is basically a tanky unit's worst nightmare, because sundering is already strong. Precision has always the ability to swing and just deal wounds that they cannot block at all. Then their skirmisher unit is basically a built-in counter for outflank and armies that are very quick, for example, that have lots of cav. Because skirmisher, first part, enemy charging this unit do not gain charge bonuses, so no rerolls, which is certainly nice. But the more important part is when this unit activates, if it's not engaged, it may pivot to any facing, which means, yeah, when they activate, they just pivot into any direction they want. This is extremely strong because usually with ranged heavy armies, you always had the problem if your opponent just can outflank or just run around you, you have a massive, massive problem. You always needed to protect your flanks somehow. And with this, you just don't care anymore. If your opponent outflanks in your side or in your rear even, you just activate, turn around, and just shoot them. You can turn around and shoot, which was not possible before. So this is just massively strong. You can almost not position them in a completely incorrect way, where your opponent just hides in your flank, because you can just turn around and shoot them. This is just super massively strong. And then as you see, I put in the Pikeman Captain, which I think is the obvious choice, at least in the beginning. With Boldness and Courage, it gives additional dice, or counts as having additional ranks, which means they go to 8/7/7 attacks. So even on the last man alive, they still shoot 7 times, which it's just super annoying for your opponent. So sometimes they might try to not focus your melee units, but focus instead your ranged units, but it just doesn't do much. If you cannot destroy this unit completely, it will still be as dangerous as when they are full, basically. So, and the last thing is their order with Overwatch. So if your enemy ends a march or maneuver in long range and line of sight, you may shoot them for free, basically. So this makes any game the Thornwatch is part of basically a game where positioning is the most important thing. Your opponent cannot just walk up to you like he pleases, because otherwise he will get shot. And with Sundering Precision, this is going to hurt a lot. So opponent has to do some really great positioning, but also you have to do some great positioning to get the biggest benefit out of this. I think Overwatch can be basically a big noob trap. If your opponent does not know how to deal with this, he will just get shot over and over and will lose the game quickly. But it will not be that easy against opponents who really know what they're doing. I think the biggest danger for the Thornwatch is any shifting and charges, because a shift is not a march or a maneuver. So they can just, if your opponent has shifts, he can just shift closer towards you and you cannot do anything. And you can also not overwatch on charges. So there is some situations where your opponent can, for example, perform a shift and then charge you, even if it's an opportunistic charge on a, like, let's say 4, 5, or 6. He will possibly try it, because maybe he will just make it, and then you have a big problem. And even if he doesn't make it, he makes a huge move and stands in front of you, and you really have to think what you do next. It's not like playing the Thornwatch is just, the Thornwatch is not going to play itself. Let's say like this. So this really requires also from you great positional skill, also lots of skill with terrain. You really need to know how to place terrain to your advantage, so your opponent maybe not even it may not be even possible for them to charge you at all. So this is really now, even more than before, a really high skill unit. Just the change from being a melee unit to a really, really high skill ranged unit. As I said, this is not going to play itself by just overwatching your opponent to death. There's lots your opponent can do, but yeah, this is still just an amazingly awesome unit now and greatly effective. And then the last combat unit we want to take a look at are the Riders of Highgarden. They have almost stayed the same, but got a pretty massive buff. They got Swift Retreat, so after an enemy completes a melee attack on them, they perform a retreat. So even if they get caught out and get charged somehow, you can retreat and then countercharge. So to just talk about the unit quick, yeah, Lance Cuff with 6 movement, which means they have 13-inch auto in charge, which is a massive threat. And on their charge, they have basically 9 attacks with Sundering on a 3+, which makes them just massively, massively dangerous, especially if they manage to attack your opponent in the flank. Of course, if the charge is over, then you drop to 5 dice, and on your last rank to 4 dice. So this is really a unit that you want to get basically the last hit with, or just make sure that afterwards you can finish off the unit quick, because you really don't want to get stuck with your bad armor. Of course, Swift Retreat now helps, but you don't want to get whacked too often with those guys. Yeah, I use them basically to protect my flank, like they used to, and just yeah, basically have them to gain board control. As I said, they have a huge auto charge range, so you can really threaten your opponent to just come in with 9 dice and potentially just finish off the unit. So also here, this is a very, very great tool. You have to have some really good positioning with those guys though. And then lastly, we want to look at the NCU loadout. Yeah, spot 1 goes to Elena Tyrell as usually. She turns off enemy NCUs. This is just massively strong. This always was strong, and I think this will always be strong. I think this is basically a must pick usually, especially now in the matchup against Lannisters, which is projected to be also one of the best armies still around. And with their extreme buff they got to Cersei, you basically want to make sure that you can turn that off. Then Elden I like now for zone replacement. You replace any zone you want with drawing 3 cards and shuffling 1 back that you don't need at the moment, which is a super nice effect. I like to use this to basically, for example, yeah, block zones that my opponent would like. For example, if my opponent really wants to heal, but and I don't, so I can just still jump on the bag and just override the effect of the bag. Or I can just, when nothing but the crown is open and I don't really benefit from crown zap, I can just override that effect. And yeah, especially since taking the crown now restores one of my Brathian banners for my Rainbow Guard. This is especially useful. And the once per game of Elden is also super nice. I can just draw any 1 card that I would like. And then last, Lord Varus. He was changed. He costs now 5 points, but gets 4 order tokens. I think Lord Varus is just great because he's basically a multi-tool or Swiss Army knife. He can do something even when he's not on the board, which is usually very useful. And I think very, very useful, especially the shift, because that shift basically happens at the end of your opponent's activation. So it's almost basically the start of your own activation. You can shift towards an opponent and your opponent cannot really do anything anymore to react. But also the sword effect with giving your opponent 3 hits can be really, really good, especially if your opponent has units with a very bad armor save. Just think about it, you have 4 order tokens. You could potentially, if you give your opponent the swords 4 times, you can just give them 12 hits, which can just to some units really deal some massive damage or pressure your opponent already early, for example. I think this is what I would use the most often. Yeah, so this is the list that I've come up with or gravitated towards the most in the beginning now. I think we will see lots of very similar lists, but I'm excited to see what other people come up with. I can imagine that you, for example, change out a 5-point NCU for a 5-point unit if you feel that you need that extra field activations. For example, take a unit of sentinels with an attachment or so. I can imagine this. But yeah, I like this list how it is, and I think we will see many similar lists to this. As I said, I think this list has some really massive damage output potential, with the Rainbow Guard being super strong. Thornwatch can deal lots of damage. Riders of High Garden can deal massive amounts of damage. But this is, you really need some great positional play with this list, I think. So let me know what you think, if you would play it like this the same, or if you would change something, and then I see you next time.